morning, everybody. It's Thursday, April 25th. And this is the AgYield War Room. I'm Dan Dempsey, and I'll be moderating today's session. As always, if you've got any questions or comments, please feel free to drop us a line in the chat area. We'll be sure to get to it during the show. Quickly here, overnight markets had May corn up a quarter at 438. May soybeans were down 8 1/4, 1157 3/4, and May Chicago wheat was up 2 1/2 at 597. And quite a bit out here in the way of news this morning. Weekly export sales were out. Fantastic week for corn, just shy of 1.3 million for 23 and another 262,300 for 24. Well above the estimates. The higher range was about 900 or so. Soybeans, on the flip side, very disappointing. 210,900 for 23. A little over 120,000 for 24. So lower end was looking for 300. So fell quite a bit below that range. Wheat sales were positive. Old crop 82,000 and new crop 24, 371,900. Meal sales also at the upper end of the range at 307,900. In the outside markets, we had GDP released for the first quarter here this morning. Came back up 1.6%, which was quite a bit below the estimates. They were looking for 2.4%. Another signal that maybe this rate cutting policy is, raising rates and cutting policy is going to need to be reevaluated here. So I know we'll talk a little bit about that. Stocks certainly didn't appreciate that number. We're down about 480 in the Dow here this morning. So lots to digest. I think one thing we were talking about that's worth noting, Jason, maybe talk a little bit about it this morning. We were looking at some longer term South American weather. This morning, we understand that they're sort of in the final stages of completing that crop, but it does appear that to get a little warmer than average and slightly below on the precip. So maybe touch on that briefly, and then we'll throw it around the room.
Yeah, sure. South America, obviously, we were pretty focused on that safrinha crop. A month ago, we were getting into the dry period of South America. It was trending dry. Models completely flipped and really poured a bunch of rain, a couple inches right when it needed it. Temps were kind of average. So really got a big relief to the crop right during pollination. I think that was a big reason that we couldn't really get that first notice day corn rally going from the March expiration. Since then, though, it's been drying out a little bit, and then the forecast just seems to keep trending drier and drier. So yeah, we're a lot of the corn is pollinated. That we've gotten through a real crucial time for most of the safrinha crop, but we still got to finish it, right? So right now I'm looking at the European model, and it's in a lot of areas there's almost no rain. Maybe quarter to a half inch in a lot of the areas. And looking like 4 or 5 degrees above normal across the whole safrinha corn belt. So, you were talking about how good corn sales have been in this country, how good basis, that we've seen all over. So I think this could affect our old crop corn demand, over the next few months. If the safrinha crop does not finish well, there might be a bid into the summer, and then obviously we're going to be starting to focus on our weather. So it's obviously still something we got to keep an eye on, kind of a developing story of how well can we finish off this safrinha crop. So mix that in with some problems potentially here in the U.S. Maybe we can get a nice little rally to get some more better marketing opportunities.
Yeah, it's good points. You bring up basis. I saw Cedar Rapids ADM yesterday was 32 over the May this morning. So yeah. those Western bids are hot.
Yeah. Sure. Yep.
So just a heads up for those in that listening demographic. I mean, that area has generally actually been rocking and rolling and getting the crop in the ground too. I talked to some guys out that way yesterday, and they've been rolling pretty hard. So, it's go figure. It happens when everybody's the busiest, but there's a reason for that, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Well, it in my opinion, it would make sense if you're sitting on some corn and you want some long exposure to still just think about, generating that cash taking advantage of a strong basis. And then there's lots of ways to re-own it if you want to kind of play for a summer market, because I would imagine if we do get some sort of, scare the funds out, kind of catch them oversold, and, we start rallying, and then we, run into all the other problems that this market setup could potentially see that we've seen in the past. A lot of that's going to be futures driven, and basis could, tend to suffer on a nice rally, especially if South America is directly competing against like that July contract that we've talked a lot about in the past. So I would think, it might not be worth the risk of holding corn bushels in the bin, with all those other factors in play. So.
Sure. No, that's a good point.
Do you guys know what corn option volatility has been doing recently?
It firmed up.
It firmed up a little bit.
Ben, we were talking this morning. There's a story out. The India, their wheat stocks are the lowest they've been in 16 years. They've had they're on the back end of a couple of poor crops, and their government has done some things to release reserves and try to support and lower domestic prices and whatnot. But we were talking just on a larger grandeur scale of some of these things that shape the sentiment of these markets. Wheat particularly has had quite a few things lately, some short covering and things that made a pop. But I thought you had some pretty good insight into that in terms of just overall market dynamic.
Yeah, it seems to me like, having been a participant in wheat for a long time, little things start to happen in places, and sometimes they continue to happen. Everything's either going right or wrong for wheat at any given, in any time frame. And that India and Pakistan in general have been places where they're kind of hand-to-mouth consumers of wheat. And you find something like this kind of gets a little bit more publicity when you factor in Black Sea issues, you factor in Russia trying to nationalize their grain markets, with some concern and legitimate concern today of dryness in Russia. I think it was mentioned in a wire yesterday afternoon that it's probably a little bit early to be super concerned about some dryness there. But as we get into the summer months, it can, it's something that could have a huge effect on the wheat and corn markets over that time frame. In 2010 as an example. So I think all these things are worth monitoring. Today it looks like we're going to have a good SRW crop. There are some forecasted rains for Western Kansas, and we'll see here how confident the funds are to stay short. I think that's the big catalyst there in wheat, especially when you look at the short as a percentage of open interest. When it gets dicey, it's it can be a kind of a parabolic market, because the wheat's been treated as a place to put shorts, and it has a huge short component relative to the open interest. So that's why we can see the short covering rallies there be so violent. But again, I think that today we might be getting a little bit out over our skis, especially 8 weeks away from harvest, not doing a tremendous amount of export business in wheat, maybe an improving HRW crop and an SRW crop that it looks to be really good again. So, that time frame of wheat is, that late June, early July. It can have some pretty violent moves once we've realized it and defined the supplies. So it'll be interesting to see if there's enough uncertainty here that we've maybe overstayed our welcome and they continue to cover it. It's a big position that they have on, and it could take a lot more to get it covered. So I think the timing of it is critical for how orderly this takes place. So, and as far as corn and beans go, we have first notice day next Tuesday, I believe. Option expiration on Friday. A lot of position clearing. Maybe not as important of a month as some of the other ones that we trade, but I still think that you got to kind of get past that and through first notice day, where all around the country, account reps, merchandisers are calling their customers and saying, do you want to price or do you want to roll? And the growers got to make that decision again, into next Tuesday. So.
Very good, Ben. I think too, for the folks that are listening, kind of in the Midwest and even further out west, give us just a little tidbit about what's going on planting wise in your neck of the woods.
South of I-70, there's some pretty good activity. There was, over the last week, people just getting started. It's been fairly wet here. Some planting going on in Southwest Ohio. North of I-70, north of State Road 26 in Indiana, really nothing going on. It's been cool and wet, hasn't dried out well. North Central Ohio, Northwest Ohio, very minimal rains forecasted for the weekend. After that, dries out. Looks like maybe there'll be some windows in there. Not really critical at this point for this area. We're used to a little bit later planting window. So it's just trickling, if anything, at this point.
Yeah, Jace, I think Northwest Illinois, by all accounts, has been going pretty good.
Customers won't call me back, so that must be a good sign that they're going. Yeah,
they're not even texting, man.
I know. They must be busy. No, well, when I do get a hold of them, right there, they're in the planter. I talked to a customer in Iowa, larger grower, who will finish up here soon, depending on the rain. And he said, well, if this rain comes, I'll maybe have 1 day left. So that's possibly getting his whole crop in April. And so we can plant so much so quick anymore, Then I feel like the rains that have been forecast, obviously they're spotty, right? So they're here and there, and there's definitely areas in there that'll miss and stay a little drier and keep the field condition just fine for planting. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, we were talking about it a little bit yesterday internally and stuff, but like for a lot of folks, they're going to get this crop in quick. You're going to have some water on the back end of it, and it's going to come up, by all estimation, should come up looking pretty good to start, which is nice.
Yeah. If you can get it all planted into some moisture, and then we're going to heat up, you would think stands are going to come up real nice.
Right.
Yep.
And it should be good. We've got a couple of minutes here. Yesterday, we touched briefly. It was kind of an evolving story in the milk complex, kind of carried over a little bit into livestock. We saw actually a little bit of a response in livestock. We opened, a couple bucks lower there. Ryland, I know we've chewed through so much in the last couple of days. I think the breakdown I see this morning, and you can agree or disagree, but we're going to be testing cows moving across state lines, and we are still being assured that the milk supply is safe. Is that kind of the synopsis you got?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of looking at some of the publicly released data, it looks like, everybody was a little bit concerned with those headlines, just considering, non-active remnants found in grocery milk, I think is just scary to hear in general. So, it seemed like you kind of came after everything, that was related to that industry, whether it be milk or beef, yesterday. Took it down pretty hard, probably even saw some new shorts here because of that kind of news. And really, as we stated, it's more of a dairy issue. And I think that's what the beef complex is worried about, is that it could evolve into something. There could be something related to that comes with this. As of right now, that hasn't happened, but that's really where the fear is going to be. But at this point, people were like, how could this get past pasteurization? And the FDA and the USDA kind of came out with a couple statements yesterday just saying that like the pasteurization will render this virus inactive or inert. So it just doesn't, it means that like, even though it's detecting viral particulates, they're non-active. They're not going to affect anybody. So I think, it's, I can't tell if this is getting blown out of proportion or not. It just feels like we're really jumping on the headlines. I mean, the market's been on a pretty nice rally, but like I said, I think as far as the beef goes, as long as there's no new guidelines or new extra costs that is associated with this, if something does prop up in the beef space on a beef cow, calf, bull, whatever, that I think we're going to start to kind of see these things dissipate, maybe come, a little bit towards the back burner a bit. So, it's just going to be an evolving story that we just wait for more and more information, I think, at this point.
No, that's good. Yeah. And you reference red meat, cold storage out yesterday, down 12% red meat year over year. What's your take? I mean, I think they were kind of looking for numbers similar to that, but at the same time,
Yeah, it really it didn't seem like it was a big mover and shaker. I mean, the cattle market likes to kind of gloss over the the cold storage report. I mean, the old adage is if you can't sell it, you store it. And I think at this point, we've kind of throttled production enough that I think that it's to be expected. I think the bigger surprise was probably on the pork side of the market on cold storage. We were at 464 million pounds. It was up 1% from the previous month, but it's a pretty low number as far as March goes. It's just the past couple of years we've seen records broken. So it looks like a low number, but I think the real focus was on bellies, and the bellies are kind of right. Belly stock 75 million pounds, pretty close to last year's levels. And I think that's really what people have been watching. I think that a lot of the price action has really come from the belly market here. So something to keep an eye on, but I think that's probably why we're a little bit easier today, is just because of that number. And, everybody looks at last year's charts, and we were trading at, considerably lower prices than we were last year. And I think we priced in a pretty good amount of demand at this point. So, I mean, it feels like the hog market is really trying to get back up to these record high levels, but it seems like we're running into resistance every time. And open interest was up 4,000 yesterday. So I think we're starting to see people a little bit more apt to sell this market, just for the sheer fact that we're just kind of hovering near contract highs. We're at a really good seasonal time frame to be selling. So, I mean, I think that's kind of what's going on now.
Very good. Appreciate that update. We just came into the open here. We got May corn up 1 3/4 at 439.5. May soybeans are down 9. 11.57 is the last. And May Chicago wheat is up 7.5 at 6:02. One administrative item: we will be back tomorrow morning for Fun Fact Friday. So we'll wrap up the week with another fun edition of Brian's Fun Fact Friday, which we all look forward to. Every day that the markets are open, we're streaming live on X, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, 8:15 Central Time. Hope everybody has a great day. We look forward to talking tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dan.